Hi folks, welcome. Here we are, extra rant, live rant, extra show. How is everybody? Happy Christmas. Hope the festivities went well. We'll just put the pre-show on for a moment or two. And great to see everybody in for an extra one today. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow with our normal Tuesday show, but thought it would be good to have a little bit of a chat and get Edwin's thoughts in terms of his property market predictions for next year. We had an interesting little shenanigans because for some reason the Edwin server was extremely lazy. So I've got a little while to go before I can put everything in the show for you. But as we just prepare for this and let people come on in, I hope everybody's had a good Christmas. I know the weather was pretty hot in some places in Australia. It was quite warm actually here. I mean, not as hot as there, but no white snow, nothing particularly good in terms of nice weather, but it wasn't too bad really. They're forecasting significant falls in temperature over the next few days and some snow coming for the new year. So we'll see about that. Of course, we're in the middle of winter. I have my roof fixed, of course, as well. So that was good. And just to give everybody a little bit of a sense of what's going on, the dogs are here. There you go. The dogs have their walk. Luna's licking her paws and generally doing a little bit of housekeeping. And here's the view of the studio. Edwin's there, ready to come in, and the rest of the system is working as normal with the chat and everything else. So we're all good to go. So at least things are happening. And I'm going now to take the pre-show off, and I'm going to start the main show, and I'll be back in just a moment. Well, good evening and welcome to the live stream on the 30th of December 2024. It's Martin North here from Digital Finance Analytics. Great to have you on the show tonight for our special live rant with Edwin. And as always, of course, we're going to have an exploration of where property's been to, where it might be going to, some of the issues, and all of those interesting questions. So it should be a fun show. And I will just, of course, remind you, as I always do, that we don't provide specific financial or legal advice or property advice, a general conversation only. Please feel free to throw your comments and questions in the chat as we go. Always interested in what's going on. Don't necessarily follow all of them. But if you want to get a question to Edwin or myself, if you use that Walk the World, that'll get the question in my queue, and then a good chance to see it. And I've also enabled Super Chat, which means you can get your question to the top of the list, or indeed make a contribution to what we do around here. Always greatly appreciated. We don't do this for profit. We do this because we think there's a really important conversation to be had. So let me bring Edwin in. Edwin, hello. How are you going? Happy Christmas and counting down to the new year.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you too, Martin. A belated one, but we are counting down to the end of the year. But look, it's great to be here, right? It's the 52nd show for the year. We've never missed a beat, unlike the leaders of the Western world that take a lot of holidays, like our mate Albo, or your mate Albo and Biden. I believe they're not too happy they had to come back into their respective roles for something that's going to happen at the end of the year.
Yeah, well, this is interesting. And look, yeah, congratulations. I mean, we had a couple of late shows and what have you, and different days, but we've actually done it every year. And boy, what a year it was. I mean, if you go back and think about some of the things we were talking about at the start of the year, we were wondering about interest rates, whether they would come down. Well, they didn't. We were wondering about how much government stimulus there would be. There was a lot. And, the markets are still quite interesting. And of course, there's a lot of rubbish being spoken about, all of the different factors in play at the moment. I know that some people are saying, well, property markets are booming. Others saying, oh, no, they're falling over left, right, and center. You and I both know that, of course, the truth is somewhere between those 2 points, and it depends where you look and which markets you look at, because not all markets are behaving in the same way. And in fact, the truth of the matter is that for every property that's gone down in price, I can point you to one that's gone up in price, or vice versa. So it's an interesting and complex situation. But I guess for me, one of the real interesting observations that for the past year has been that, well, it's two sides of the same bird, two cheeks of the same bum. Doesn't matter which side of politics is in. It's the same old, same old.
Yeah, look, it is the same old, but look, you got to throw in a bit of liveliness in there as well, right? So otherwise, the world just won't keep on spinning. I mean, like, look. I'm one of my predictions for 2025. Is going to is I've been thinking about it, and it's going to be that we could become, Trump could ask whoever leads us in 2025 could ask them to become the governor of Australia, and we could become the 53rd state. 51st state's going to be Canada. That's on the cards, and the 52nd could be Greenland, if Trump successfully buys that from the stakeholder, and I know who owns it. I think it's sweet. I don't know who owns Greenland, but it could be the 53rd, followed by New Zealand, could be the 54th. I mean that would be a wild prediction, but that's on the cards based on the economic outlook and where we're headed. We're certainly not necessarily going up in terms of our economy. We're going down. Prices are going up in certain sectors, but a lot of other prices are coming down. And overall, you could say money talks, right? So if they've got the money to put it on the table, who do they have to buy it from, Martin? They have to buy it from King Charles, or who do they buy Australia from?
Well, it is an interesting situation. Very much everything's in play at the moment. And I'm very grateful to Cookie, who sent through a few clips. We might look at those shortly. And Cookie's been a great stalwart and supporter of the channel for a long time, but particularly this last year, throwing a lot of clips to us that we've been able to incorporate in the show. So kudos and a call out to Cookie for all his support. And look, wherever you look, I see confusion and complication. The fact of the matter is that wherever you look, you could say, well, actually things are, a bit wobbly. But I guess it might be just worth revisiting briefly some of your predictions from last year and just see, how things are going. And your first prediction, of course, was quite interesting. So you were suggesting that the listing numbers would be low. But actually, towards the second half of the year, listings did actually move up a little, right? And then fell away again. So I think you were pretty much spot on in terms of that. But you did also say that prices were still going to be stronger. So, again, I think you were pretty much spot on for the Sydney region, less so possibly in some of the other regions too. So at least you got your first prediction pretty much spot on, I think.
Look, and I think we're fortunate that the numbers did pop up towards the spring selling season, and they rose. There was a point there where we were close, just tipping over 4,000 more listings on market than what we had last year in the Sydney region. That's both houses, apartments, and land. Land obviously took up a huge, a quarter of that rise, because land lots came up in en masse towards the end of the year. But yeah, look, there was a lot of chatter about the rise in listing numbers, but it was met with just as many keen buyers. And then you've got a sudden drop at the end of the year. We've experienced a sudden drop, so we're actually only about 2,000, or just a little bit above 2,000 more sales on market than what we were same time last year. But again, I emphasize that almost 50% of those extra listings on market that are still okay. It is the end of the year. It is the Christmas period. It is the end of year season. But you got to compare it. We're comparing it year on year. So, but most of those extra numbers are made up of housing lots, which at the end of the day, they seem to be piling up like they did over in Melbourne. But nobody wants to buy them because of the cost of construction. So look, some would say I was half right. Others would say I was on the money. But again, we go back to, like you said, Martin, the prices, the price points for properties across many city markets shot up. They didn't go down, regardless of the fact that in some areas, in some markets, they tripled, quadrupled in terms of numbers. But the demand met the supply.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that was quite interesting that the discussion, of course, has been very strongly on the supply issues. And of course, we've had MIMS and, everybody saying, oh, we need to build more, build more, build more, despite the fact that our capacity to build is severely crimped. Why? Well, partly because, of course, we've got, planning all over the place. And, it's interesting that there's been quite a lot of discussion now about planning rules and regs. And, Cookie actually was able to just supply this one. Time to cut the act. A clunky old law is killing our housing dream, says the industry. A chorus of states' most prominent developers and architects have called for a once-in-a-generation overhaul to the state's Planning Act to fix the housing crisis. Planning Act out of date, MIMS urged to overhaul the unwieldy 1979 legislation to fix crippled housing shortages. Now, the issue I've got, Edwin, is sure, you can tinker with planning, and of course they have released some of the rules and regs. They've made it easier to build. But if you don't have people who can build, if the industry doesn't have the capacity to do it, and if in fact the industry is being crowded out because of all the public investment programs, which are often construction related, it means that whatever you do to the planning regs, you're not necessarily going to change the game particularly. And so for me, this is a bit of a fallacy in terms of, what is actually going on. And it's interesting that, of course, the other factor here is the falling over of the construction sector. This continues. Here's another one that was reported the other day with Benson's property group collapsing, developing 1,337 homes. So that's yet another example of the problem with construction. And in fact, at the start of last year, you actually that was one of your calls, right? I think it was your second prediction that the building and construction sector would actually, have difficulty. And we've seen a high proportion of those continue to fall and fail. Now, that's partly because of the stupid programs through COVID, where effectively people were encouraged to go out and get money to build. A lot of the deals were actually fixed price or were otherwise limited. Then the cost of materials shot through the roof. The tax department, of course, postponed a lot of tax take, and then, of course, turned it around and said, no, you've got to start now paying the tax you owe. And so all of that stuff is there. And as a result of all of this, what you've got is a construction sector ill-equipped, unable, unwilling, and by the way, not profitable to build.
100%, Martin. This is no matter what the government's throwing at the sector at the moment with MINS's, basically demand now to taking the power away from the local governments to fast track 100 developments around New South Wales, or the majority would be Sydney. Then the question is who's going to build it, how they're going to build, and what is the end product. We know for a fact that 99% of these things are going to be high-rise developments, but the interesting thing there also, Martin, is apart from the prediction that I said that the building sector and the construction sector was going to come into a lot more grief this year, we're going to see a lot more of it in 2025. It's going to unfold because let's not make two qualms about it. I mean, the HIA have said it up front. More than 50% of first and second tier developers builders are literally trading insolvent, and how many more are basically going broke, in the process of going broke, and are going to take a lot of tradespeople with them. So the governments have thrown in all these changes to fast track construction and fast track building, and we saw that which was also one of my other predictions there, that New South Wales were going to, Mints was going to match Alan's, Melbourne tack on building more homes, where you could actually build more granny flats. Just about every house, freestanding house in Melbourne could have a granny flat. That could be, once again, a quick pace through the building bodies down there to get things done. And I said that Mints would meet it, but in actual fact, he bettered it by making by taking away the power from the local governments. But going back to your point, that with these changes, quick changes in policy, nothing's moved. You've got a huge, a large amount, double the number of freestanding homes for sale in Melbourne, and nobody's really taking them up. We still got a rental crisis in Melbourne, but nobody's buying the properties that have come up for sale there. So there's something is. They're trying to drive vehicles. If I could use the analogy, they're trying to drive cars, four-wheel drives with square tires. You're not going to get far.
Well, that's spot on. And the other point, of course, is the quality of construction is still a huge issue, and we've been talking about this for a number of years. But I don't see any significant shift into higher quality construction. In fact, I had a couple of one-on-one conversations over the last week or so, and in both situations, the people were involved with home and land packages and were struggling to get the quality to a level that they would accept. So effectively, the builders are building down, they're using cheaper materials, they're cutting corners, and so the quality of the stuff that's being built is supremely low. And I don't see, all of the stuff about the building commissioner and trying to hold people to account, et cetera, and naming and shaming, it has done very little to improve the quality of construction. And it is fascinating as I talk to more and more people here, because I see the same trends coming up again and again and again and again. So effectively, they're building down to a price, they're cutting corners. And the other interesting observation here is that the materials that they're using, most of which are now being imported, are, you don't know the origin of them necessarily. You don't know whether they've got asbestos in the sheets and those sorts of things. And we've talked about that several times. So what are we building, as well as the other question, Edwin?
Yeah, and this is the scary part moving forward into 2025 and 2026. Let's not forget that CSR, Boral, and the name eludes me of the main company that was publicly listed, that was run from Queensland. Yeah, these are companies and manufacturing companies that would manufacture a lot of the products that we use to build, and you could rely on that they met the standards, and they were checked on, and there was a lot of pressure put on these companies to meet the building codes and the building standards that we require here in Australia, and the general public demand. But that CSR was sold to a French company, Boral, I think to that eludes me. That was sold to. We had a show a few months back. I think it was 4 months ago, where I shared about that in more detail, where I had my notes. And now, but the interesting thing now, Martin, is the people the insiders that I have in Boral in head office, they're telling me that. It's pretty much what I've been saying and what we shared on the show back then. It's really, and it's really a means to. They're going to continue to use the name, and CSR has a lot of different branches and a lot of different products, from insulation to cladding to all sorts of stuff, right? And they're going to except that those products aren't going to be manufactured here in Australia anymore. They're going to be manufactured from overseas countries because it's cheaper. Now that it's a private company, they don't give two rats. But unfortunately, it's going to take anywhere between 5 to 10, maybe even 15 years for the general public to wake up and realise and the authorities to wake up and realise that, hey, hold on a minute, the label says CSR, the label says Boral, the label says this, that, or the other, but we thought they were still to the Australian standards, but actually not, because they're going to be bought in container loads from overseas. But then again, does the government really care? That was the question that we posed back there. Is the government really going to really worry about it when in actual fact they need products, they need materials to be priced down in order for builders and developers to have a greater appetite to build and develop. The government, are they going to turn a blind eye? That's the $64 million question, right? Are they going to turn a blind eye, and how many more people are going to suffer? In the space of the do-it-yourself renovators, and how many more people are going to suffer because of improper use or ways to dispose of or apply the materials that are being imported to do those small to medium to large renos that people are so keen on doing here in Australia.
Absolutely. And I don't see any change in that. And in fact, I think the situation is getting worse. And I had a chance to have a conversation with a medium-sized building and construction firm, actually based in Melbourne. And they were just telling me some of the pain that they go through trying to get the labour, trying to get people who are qualified enough to do the job. So they're finding it really difficult. So, people turn up and claim to be able to do X, Y, Z, and W, and then find that the skills that they have are very low. Trying to juggle the still accelerating, in some cases, costs of materials with lower quality. And interestingly, they also made this comment, and I don't know whether you've heard it before, but they said, if we build 5 houses, we chuck away the equivalent of 1 house's worth of stuff that we don't use. And I'm thinking, wow, I hadn't ever thought of it like that. And they said, well, that's because, of course, things have to be cut to size and the quality isn't always there, and you have to sort of get a bit more. So actually, there's a huge wasteful process in the middle of all of this as well, that means that effectively there's huge inefficiency inside the construction system in Australia. And by the way, it's not just Australia, it's also in other places around the world. Interestingly, that in some countries, of course, they use prefab construction much more, particularly in some of the European countries. Germany in particular is an expert at building in a big factory and then rolling it out and then putting it up in a week or two. Very different way of thinking about it. But of course, most of the stuff in Australia is not prefabbed, it's sort of built on site. But the whole concept of the amount of waste and the materials that are chucked away through the process was something that I hadn't really appreciated.
Well, one in 5, or a house in the equivalent of 1 house in every 5 is. I think he needs to re-employ subcontractors. He needs to relook at his subcontractors. The general tolerance level is 10%, 10% waste. Some in some trades, it's 5% would be fair. Interesting how from a high-rise development point of view, they actually in the costing of the construction, they allow for 5%, as I call it, 5% stuff ups. They use a different word, but we'll just use stuff ups because we're a child sensitive and child friendly show.
Exactly, but these things are pretty amazing, and the more I delve into this, the more I shake my head in sort of disbelief as to how things are going. Now, in terms of disbelief, I just want to put this one up from Jason, because we touched on this the other day. Claire O'Neill declaring that the government doesn't want to bring property prices down, while they wants house prices to, quote, sustainably grow. Well, I would argue that there's no surprise there, but that doesn't actually help. And of course, the context was the radio interviewer whose jaw dropped as a young prospective property purchaser, saying, "Well, hang on, that's ridiculous. How much higher will property prices go? How much further will they be in terms of ability to afford?" And it is just worth reflecting on the massive change in affordability in recent times. One of the factors, of course, that we look at is the debt to income ratio. And, 20, 30 years ago, people were borrowing, what, 4 times their income. Now it's 6, 7, 8, or even more sometimes, which is pretty amazing. And, the result of all of this is that housing is less and less affordable. And yet the government is now saying we've got no intention of putting a floor, down. They want to put a floor under prices so they don't rise. And so they rise higher. And interestingly, Sam made this comment the other day. Let me just get rid of that one there. Looking at the median home price compared with the capacity to pay, and you can see there that it's significantly dropped. That's the other problem. So effectively, it's become further and further from being accessible to ordinary people. Now, we do have a lot of migrants, and of course, a lot of migrants, as we've highlighted, come in with significant cash to be able to buy. We've also got quite a few people who are buying property with a view to converting it into multi-tenancy investment properties. And as we've said before, that gives them a huge advantage in terms of what the value is actually likely to be relative to ordinary owner of a property who would look at it through a different lens. So all of those things are in play, but to my mind, this can't go on for indefinitely. There is a point beyond which property prices cannot continue to rise. And now, okay, I have to tell you that, of course, the banks are still trying to find ways to do that. And, there's this one from Cookie. Thank you, Cookie. 2 tweaks would let first home buyers borrow $160,000 more dollars, right? So effectively, by looking at different ways to handle tuition debt is assessed, and applying a smaller serviceability buffer would increase the borrowing power of younger buyers, NAB says. Well, of course, they're talking their own book here. And here's the problem. We are seeing more and more people over indebted. And of course, with interest rates staying higher for longer, it's putting a lot of pressure on those households. So effectively, what Claire O'Neill has said in that initial comment, and back to Jason's comment, is it's okay for people to get more and more leveraged up and to borrow more and more and more. So a greater proportion of their income is going on their housing. And in my surveys, I've shown now that 45 to 50% of income going on paying that mortgage or paying that rent, sometimes even more. I mean, this is an unsustainable journey that we're on, and yet the politicians clearly don't want to rock the boat. And why? Because there are lots of people with property who would actually get pissed off if property prices started to fall significantly.
I guess this is when I put my conspiracy hat on, Martin, and I say that a lot of this is really geared for the push to drive the ones that haven't got into the market already, looking at getting into the market, getting them into buying off the plan apartments in order for the construction boom to kick off and get started again. And I back up that theory or that conspiracy with the shutting down of essential services in the outer regional towns of all the states to drive people back into the commercial hubs. People have got to realise that the governments, the local, state, and federal governments, they need the taxes and the levies. I keep on saying over and over again. I mean, back in I think it was 2008, 2009, I wrote a story about how much it costs. It's something like 42% of the cost of building are made up of taxes and levies, special levies and so forth to post the purchase of the land. And this is the thing. So giving people a stimulus, giving people a handout in order to get into the market just drives the prices up. But in actual fact, what we should be doing, and should have been doing for over 2 decades, is getting rid of some of the those taxes that are paid and contributions that are paid on the way through after the purchase of the land, in order to develop, to sustain and maintain that level of construction that was needed. But of course, it all goes back to that, to show me the money. As we put out in the show, a couple of years ago, show me the money. And that's all about high density, medium to high density. In order for all those taxable contributions to be then shared amongst the people. And when you've got the public sector across all levels, growing exponentially in terms of committees, think tanks, and everything else. I mean, is it any wonder? And you've got a junkie. You've got a junkie that's hooked. That's been hooked on that stamp duty. That's been hooked on that stamp duty fix for so long. And they can't come off it. They can't come off it now, and they won't come off it. And that's the sad part about 2025. For now, my outlook for 2025 isn't rosy for those that are looking at getting into the market, or different markets across different states. But more to the point, our backyard, which is the Sydney region. So we're going to obviously expand on that a little bit more as we go through the predictions for 2024, and then move on to my thoughts for 2025.
Yeah, it's interesting because Jason, posited this thought. Perhaps the pollies want those people to fall through so that they can pick up a cheap deal, creates more division between the haves and the have-nots. Not perhaps they want super funds. Perhaps they want super funds to buy it. And of course, we are seeing some evidence now of large super funds and other wealth management entities hoovering up some of the cheaper property that's coming on the market. I think that's part of it. I also think, Jason, the other factor, of course, is if you look at the distribution of investment properties and you compare those that politicians hold relative to the rest of the marketplace, guess what? Politicians on average have more properties per person than the average Australian. And so they are very exposed to property. The other point, of course, is that the truth of the matter is that there are more people who own property relative to those who perhaps don't, who are active voters and actively involved in the political process. So in a way, the truth of the matter is that politicians don't want to see wealth being eroded. Politicians don't want to see investors losing money on property, or indeed owner-occupiers losing money on property, because the paper wealth is there, and the paper wealth is meant to be a bit of a feel-good factor, although actually I have a suspicion that the feel-good factor is wearing thin for many people because, of course, they're paying a lot at the moment. So all of those things are in play. And the observation, Edwin, that I've got through 24 and then I think into 2025 is we're going to see politicians continuing to mess around the edge. So that, they'll try and do a few things. They'll be looking at the announceables, and I've used the term announceables for quite some time. This is basically, see, we're doing stuff. So, don't complain that we're not doing stuff, because we are. But in fact, what they're doing is not actually solving the root cause issues. And what they're doing potentially is just taking the situation even worse. As Jason says, and I think we're just worth dwelling on that for a second, exactly. They won't touch negative gearing or CGT discounts, looking after themselves. It's human psychology 101. I think that's exactly right. And the fascinating thing to me is that you can see Albo, selling his his property in Sydney and then going and buying a 4.1 million property up the road on the Central Coast, and then spending a bit of money on a new road just by accident. It just happens to be going the right direction at the right time. Well, I am afraid that there's one rule for them and there's one rule for ordinary people, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't see through that.
That's the interesting thing. I mean, we could do a whole show on that whole process, or that the sale of his investment home in Dulwich Hill to the purchase of the $4.1 million home there in Copacabana in the Central Coast, and to what it's been rented for. I mean, it says a lot. It shows you that it's not just happening here in Australia. It's happening in a lot of the Western countries, unfortunately, Martin, where the politicians are just kicking the constituents in the guts. But look, at the end of the day, as Dusty and I, when we have our deep and meaningfuls, we can't change what America does. We can't change what Russia does. We can't change what the rest of the world do, or even our local politicians do in actual sense. But we can change our outlook to change the circumstance and to change our lives, or what we want to change in our lives. We've got to bring it down to to our level and look at what we do have, what we are able to change in a positive manner. I mean, we could become more philosophical, as philosophical as we can, again, and we could talk about all sorts of niceties, and we can also get angry and start putting shit up on X and calling everybody this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, we've got to look at it's a game. It's a game, and it's a game of where the stake is life, where the stake is call it the stake, call it the trophy, is life, is health, is peace of mind, is sanity, and you've got to learn the rules. You've got to learn the rules, because if you don't learn the rules, you ain't going to get far. And you're going to get burnt, and the many your wallet's going to go up in smoke. You're going to go up in smoke, but you just got to learn the rules. And this is what we're all about, is teaching in this space, teaching the people the rules, understanding their opponents, understanding how to navigate through different circumstances, and hopefully they'll have a better outcome than what they would have had if they hadn't been following following the rants and listening to your show, Martin.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And of course, one of the things that I want to highlight, and actually my great animal made this point a little while ago, average person is uneducated on how to manage money, never taught in schools or by parents. I think that's part of the problem, is we have a very low level of capability amongst many people. And in fact, some of the conversations I have with my one-on-one, they're fairly basic conversations about cash flow management and about understanding what property is and what property isn't, and why all property doesn't behave in the same way, and all of those things. It's like a basic level of understanding. And I think the other factor I'd also highlight, Edwin, is that a lot of people have very little feeling for value. And I did a post yesterday talking about, I think cash is really important, because actually if you handle real cash, if you're a kid and you get your real pocket money, you get to feel what money is like, and also when you haven't got it, what it means. Whereas if you just go on credit all the time, you've never really felt value, you've never really felt not having money. And I think there's another factor that's in the mix too. We're sort of such a credit-based society now that people just almost think money's for free. And, okay, you get charged interest, but you don't really see that. So for my mind, there's a really important educational question. And one of the reasons why we do these shows is to try and lift people's awareness, raise their understanding of some of the issues so they can make better decisions. I'm not anti-property. I've done very well in property over years, but I've been careful with what I've bought, and I've gone through my, standard processes to make sure that I understand that what I'm buying is sensible relative to what other people might say. And by the way, ignore what the portals say, ignore what the mainstream media is saying at the moment. Remember that the mainstream media, particularly those in the property sector, they've all got an axe to grind. So of course you see, all these articles on the the great prices, the hot properties, what's been viewed, the most listings, or article on getting the property ladder, the property porn, the sprawling River Cove mansion at Helensvale, goodness me. These are so far from reality for ordinary people that I think sometimes we get a bit misled. And even if you look at some of the advice, so this was this one that Cookie threw us, getting on the property ladder in 2025. First point, be realistic. So the second one is budget and plan. I agree about that. Be prepared to renovate. Well, maybe, but the cost of renovation can be quite significant. Be prepared to really move. So geography does play a point. And stop trying to time the market. Well, timing the market, I think, is always a bit of a duff sense of, you never know what's going to happen. So there are some interesting thoughts there. But again, the way that it's twisted suggests that it's definitely an issue. And this is the first point. It's quite interesting. Unfortunately, social media only seems to highlight unattainable homes. So first-time home buyers may have an unrealistic view of what their first home looks like. Many make the mistake of chasing properties that are out of reach in the hope that one might just fall their way. The reality is the sooner you recognize properties that sit well within your budget, the more likely you are to be a successful player. And I do think that's quite important. So look, there's some interesting thoughts there, but you got to strip away the hype, and you got to strip away all this sort of social media rubbish and all of the property portal stupidity. And of course, I always come back to the other point, Edwin, these average prices that people quote, price movements in Sydney over the last year or whatever, completely and utterly meaningless.
And this is why you got to look at the individual markets, the individual area, and the type of property. I mean, one of the other predictions that I had for 2024 was I said that if you really want to talk in general terms, okay, I'll give you general terms. I predicted that property prices across Sydney were going to go up 5 to 10%, and in some areas they will actually clock above 15%, and we saw that. We saw that in areas. I've sent you some screenshots of different suburbs that I've quickly managed to.
Yeah, this is Blacktown, which is just the first one on the list. I didn't manage to get them all in, but Blacktown, you can see there the movements, and 2024 was 8.4%.
Yeah, 8.4%. I mean, the national average for home values, and that incorporates apartments and houses, was 5%. Was 5% growth. But I mean, yeah, and this is where people have got to, where the majority of people really got to pick and look at things granular. I mean, there's only so much time in the show. That was Blacktown. Then you've got Liverpool went up 7.4%. You got Beecroft went up 4.5%. Yeah, DY in 2024 gone up 14.8%. Stanmore 6.8%. Maroubra 5.7%, and then you've got your suburbs in the Blacktown LGA where you've got 5.8% for Kings Langley, and Cabramatta 15.5% went up in 2024. Then you've got St Mary's 14%. Some say it's actually 16%. Then you've got Kings Park, which is right next door to Kings Langley in Blacktown, and that went up 14%. I know it's probably closer to 20% in reality. That went up. But I mean, these are the things, because I say these things, and I guess I've got an inside running into these predictions because we see. We attend so many auctions, we attend so many open houses. We talk to a lot of agents that I've known over the 2.5-3 decades in the industry, and I get all the information. I'm able to compile all this for our team and for our clients in order to help them make better decisions. So that's one thing. One of the things. The other thing that you brought out in your previous commentaries was that there's so many things that have been. And there'll be more in 2025. We're going to see more websites and more people trying to buy into the property sector, the property industry, by coming up with fandangled websites and predictive websites that do this, that do that, but they don't do anything other than give you lagging data. And the unfortunate thing, Martin, that many people fell into in 2024 was that they relied on one, at best 2 or 3 point indicators as to what was happening in the property arena, the property market that they wanted to go into. And you could see, and you could hear it. You could see it on the social media posts, mainly over X. How many people just got conned and got taken and carried away by websites that just provide lagging data and information that's on the surface that anybody can see. If you put it all together, you can see it, which really doesn't mean what's happening. What you want to know is you want to be closer to the ground, at grassroots level as possible. You want to be close to the event as possible in order to make to make decisions and see the changes. But not only that, it's not only about just looking into the market that you want to go into and understanding that intrinsically, inside and out, but you also want to know what geopolitical forces are going to influence the markets as well. So this is why I've been, a lot of those predictions were on anything and on many of those points as to what was happening globally, and how they were going to influence the market. I mean, look. Whether people like it or not, I even said that there was going to be a famous individual was going to be assassinated and to influence the election in the US, and what effect would that have on our market? I talk about it, jest about it, I skim news on it, I troll people on different things. I mean, just having a good time and posting things from time to time. But look, at the end of the day. If Xi Jinping sneezes, it affects our market. If Putin, goes for a swim, it affects our market. If Trump gets, the political figure in America gets shot at, it's going to affect the future outcomes of the people's perception of world events, which is at the end of the day, it's going to affect our market. And the reason why it affects our market, the reason why I strongly believe it has such a big impact. Whether these what would you call it? These personas overseas can influence, have such a great influence. As I say, jokingly, if one sneezes, if one farts, if one does this, one does that, it affects our market. It's because we're really a small market, and people have got to understand that, Martin. People have got to understand that when you look at the main capital cities of Australia, although there are 20, let's say 24,000 properties or 27,000 properties for sale in the Melbourne market at the moment, according to the Melbourne region, according to Domain. At the end of the day, even that's which is and Sydney's tracking at 16,000. Yeah, and there's only 8,500 homes, freestanding homes for sale, or homes which will also incorporate duplexes and in some cases villas as well, for sale in the Sydney market. And people are trying to tell me that this is a huge market. It's not. Not in relative terms when you compare it to the rest of the world and when you compare it to the money that's out there in the rest of the world. And unfortunately, these websites that have been put up and put out that people are so influenced by and so conned by are just leading them astray and leading them to make, in my view, wrong decisions. And in essence, the timing's way off. Or the information is way off. And look, like I said, it's because they pull on people's emotions rather than give you a logical path or help you to navigate through a very perilous path, in trying to get into the property arena. And it's really it really is an obstacle course trying to get in. But unfortunately, in their ways, they lead people astray.
Well, I think that's right, Edwin. And it's interesting. Laura's just thrown this question in, which is quite good. So we might touch on it briefly because it's a really good illustration. So I have a question. How much should a young tradie be spending on a house loan? Also, how much should they have as a down payment? Now, that's an interesting question. Of course, the answer is always, it depends. But I can give you a few rules of thumb. Generally, people would suggest that if you're spending more than 30% of your gross income on servicing your mortgage debt, then potentially that's in the sort of the area of, could be difficult. And in fact, we're seeing some people now in the 35 to 45 or even 50%. So I would say the first guideline would be shoot for between 30 and maybe 35% from a serviceability perspective. Depends, of course, also on whether your interest rate is going to change. Bearing in mind, of course, that if you go fixed rate, then you don't know what's going to happen when the rate changes later, but that's a sort of a first rule of thumb. The second one, in terms of how much as a down payment, well, one of the issues that people, of course, come across is the lender's mortgage insurance problem. So if you have a smaller deposit, the bank will insist that you actually go and buy lender's mortgage insurance, which was quite a large chunk of cash, and it protects the bank, not the individual. So if you can actually accumulate more than a 20% deposit, so you can avoid lender's mortgage insurance, not only do you end up with a low interest rate, but you also can forego the additional payment that you'd have to make to the lender's mortgage insurer to be able to cover the cost. So it's actually more economic. So my sort of basic guideline, and this isn't financial advice, but a basic guideline is if you get above 30%, you look at it very carefully. And if you are below 20% deposit, again, look at it very carefully. Now, there are people who are paying 50% of their income on their mortgage with a 3% deposit. Do they feel comfortable? Can they sleep well at night? I would suggest probably not, but some will. But if you want to be conservative, then perhaps go a little bit more towards the 20% and 30% in terms of the deposit and the amount that you pay in terms of your mortgage payments. But every situation is different. What I would say, and this is the thing that I come back to again and again, so many people just don't actually do a little bit of a calculation about not currently what's today, but what's going to look like in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years' time. Remember that incomes have tended not to grow that fast. Costs of living have continued to rise quite quickly. Costs of the rates, for example, the costs of repairs have to be factored in as well. So one of the things to also perhaps think about if you think you're buying a property is calculating what you need to do in terms of running costs and make sure that works too. Again, when I have my one-on-one conversations, it's actually the running costs rather than the purchase costs, which are often the trap. What do you think, Edwin?
Well, look, that's all sound advice, right? And it comes back to the individual. I mean, I'm not going to say that you're right, and I'm not going to say you're wrong. It all very much sound advice in general terms. In terms of, well, first and foremost, in my next lifetime, I've already got my ticket up, and I'm coming back as I put my order in. I want to come back as a plumber/carpenter. I think that's the job. That's the shit. That really is the shit. Like some would say, electricians, tell me, oh no, mate, electrical's the best. It's all clean. Yeah, mate, it's all clean, but that shit's deadly. That is deadly. And you can't see electricity, but you can certainly you know when it grabs you, right? So that's first and foremost. I've been working with some young apprentices over the last 6 months, giving them advice in terms of that specific topic. What has come, and I'll give not knowing what type of trader the question was all about, but I've been working with some young plumbers and electricians in giving them advice and working through them, and also you could say an engineer. So then, well, he's a bit more than a tradie. Now they've all got different lifestyles, right? So you've got the one of the young electricians just helped him successfully buy a property, and he managed to squirrel away a 20% deposit, but he was prepared to go out and buy a house because he's got a couple of dogs. He loves his dogs, and he wanted a house with a big yard. Well, it's considered to be big when you're talking 650 square meters nowadays. So he had to he went out Richmond way, and he's prepared to travel in order to get to work. That's his choice. That's what he wanted. That's what but he managed to save up. He managed to save up 20% in order to get in. But he had to make a decision to move further out from the Blacktown LGA in order to be able to afford and have what he wanted. Right. The other young guy is a plumber. He's still saving up for his property. This young guy, he's got a full-time job with a plumbing company. He's a fully licensed plumber. He's got a full-time job with a plumbing company. He knocks off at 3 o'clock, between 3 and 3:30, but he starts at 6:30 in the morning. He's at his boss's place picking up the work truck. Knocks off at 3:30, and then what he does, Martin, then he does his own jobs, which his boss knows. He's got his own, buys his own materials and everything, and it's all kosher with his boss. And he'll sometimes get home at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. The other day we were on the site because one of our clients got in a real bad jam, and I was actually helping them out on site till 11 o'clock at night. And he travelled home just as far as I had to travel as well. But this was a special client that we wanted to, get them back in full use of the facilities. That's his story, and he works weekends. So he's aiming for, as you said, he's aiming for that 30% deposit, because he wants a bit of a fancier home, and he wants it a little bit closer to the lifestyle that he leads. And he's got a partner, and I think they've also got a kid as well. There's a kid in the way. Now, then there's another tradie who's also a plumber. He's I sometimes wonder whether he's more of a plumber or whether he's more of a bodybuilder, because he spends more time grooming himself and going to the gym than he does. But I mean, he starts at 7. He's already running his own business. Kudos to him. He's already running his own business. But you ask him to be at a job at 7:30, 8 o'clock. He might turn up at 8:30. He had to have his protein shake after he worked out and all that sort of stuff, whatever he did, and then he'll knock off early because he has to go to the gym and work out. And weekends you don't see him because he's focusing on his body. So it all comes back to what type of tradie, what's your motivation, where you want to be, and that goes right across the board. The engineer is my son. It took me over 18 months to convince him to convince him away from buying an apartment in Homebush West, and which he was wanting to buy into, because all his mates bought in that area as well, and they all wanted to be together and that. And it took me 18 months to convince him, and we bought a 2-bedroom cottage in the mountains, which then over 6 months, we converted it into a nice 3-bedroom without expanding the roof line, and it sits on almost 800 square meters of land, and the block of the block of land is you can put a granny flat on there in the future and get a second income. He doesn't live there now. He's renting it out, but he also came in with a 20% deposit, and he's done very well. But 18 months, Martin, of sitting down, talking to him, going through the whole thing, but notwithstanding what I've been doing for 35 years, I still had to. It took me 18 months to convince my son to away from buying a dog box in Homebush West, and getting a freestanding home as his first home, as his principal place of residence in the mountains. And now he's got he's almost doubled in the property's almost doubled in value, and so how much do you have? I guess how much do you need to buy into, apart from the analogy that you gave earlier on in the figures? I think a lot of it a big part of that equation is what sort of motivation do you have, and what is it that you wanted to attain? One of the one of the one of the uh, I can say one of the most memorable events that I went through in terms when one of the many, but one of the most memorable was selling an old church out in the middle of New South Wales. When I was doing sales, I had a client that had properties all over New South Wales, and she took me out to the Never Never, and I sold the church for, I think from memory, it was $16,500. Yeah, an old church. And the person that bought it was a young apprentice. Although she wanted $20,000 for it, she let it go for 16 because he was a young carpenter, young local carpenter, and his dream was to do it up. And I'd love to go back there and see what it looks like now. But look, that's just the story. But tradespeople, I think, are very much if they can get, they'll be more attuned to buying homes that can be, that can be renovated. And also you find that a lot of these young tradespeople, that they'll know their mates and other mates, and that can help them along. But unfortunately, not many have that. Not many have that. Are in that position to be able to keep the cost down, like you said, Martin. It's very difficult, and things are only going to get harder. If you're not careful, and if you're not, you're just going to, go out there thinking that you're going to do it on your own, or thinking that you're going to be able to manage, or you're thinking you're going to be able to, get tradespeople to do work for you at 3,500 a square meter on a reno, when it's now pushing close to the 4,700.
Yeah, well, I think there's a sense of unrealism amongst many people that I chat with in terms of aspirations to own. I know people want to own property, and I'm not saying they shouldn't, but they need to do it with eyes open at the moment. And it's interesting, Laurie came back with another question, which I'll just briefly touch on. The unrealised gains tax. Now, of course, this is quite a complex situation, and you probably want to get specific tax advice. But generally, the principle is, if it's your own principal residence, then there's no gains tax to be paid on the value that you might rise. If it's an investment property, and depending on how long you hold it for, et cetera, then there is potentially unrealised gain tax if you actually were to sell it. But it's half that relating to, for example, capital gains from other asset types, like, for example, stocks and shares. So, that's one of the things that the government did some years ago to try and make the investment sector of the property market grow. Why? Because the governments were effectively trying to walk away from their responsibilities with regard to social housing, and wanted to outsource the investment sector to mum and dad investors. And mum and dad investors, of course, like the idea of unrealised capital gains tax being lower. Now, I actually think that plus the negative gearing is one of the reasons why we've got a property market that's very badly distorted from where it should be, which is why I mentioned earlier on about the fact that property prices relative to income are now much higher than they were, and getting higher. And that's clearly putting a lot of pressure on a lot of people. So, but that's the very brief answer there, Laurie. I can't really go into more detail than that. Well, Edwin, we should probably just move on now, because we could go through the other predictions. You mentioned, for example, the lithium battery fires which happened, and you mentioned a few other things last year as well, which came through true. But let's move forward now and think about 2025. There are lots of obstacles, of course, for 2025 buyers, not least because the prices are still running. Interestingly, in my surveys, I see a lot of downsizers, down traders, people looking to move somewhere smaller, but they can't find anywhere, so they stay put. And by the way, the transaction costs when they move are substantial, and that's another reason why people sometimes decide not to move. You've got those looking for people to uptrade. The uptraders are a sector that I watch very closely. And just to give you a relative, there's 1.2 million down traders who expect to move in the next few years, according to my surveys, but only 800,000 up traders. So there are a small number of people looking to buy up rather than buy down. But of course, I suppose we should also talk about the old Kryptonians, right? Because some of those will have done reasonably well. And here's the old slide, right? We hit 100,000 US on Bitcoin at the end of 2024. Dropped back a little bit now, but it's interesting that I have had a few of those who actually were in Bitcoin from quite some time ago, and you use that as a way to accumulate and then get out and effectively now buying property. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then, of course, we always talk about property investors and the PR holders. And your favorite, Edwin, the desperate housewives.
Yeah, well, they're all the well cashed up buyers that are going to be obstacles for many that are looking at, or it's going to be the opposition for many that are looking at buying into the into the property markets, in particular the Sydney property market. As you said, the downsizers, they're going to be looking for, and the downsizers are mainly people that are looking at smaller homes, single level homes, villas, freestanding homes, and that puts a lot of pressure on the smaller homes and lifts the values up. So by nature of osmosis, if you got a small house going up in value, well, the bigger house has got to also go up in value. It's going to be worth a fair bit as well. So these are this is the change, because you've now got this changeover of the as many bag the boomers. You've got this changeover and this retiring changeover, the retirees. But the retirees, let's not forget, they bought their homes in the 60s. And 60s, early 70s, early 80s, and they're not really looking at moving. They don't want to move. They've lived there for 50, 60 years of their life. They've had the family. It's a family home, so they want to stay local because the children are were able to buy in the early 2000s or and they want to stay close to the grandkids or great grandkids for some. And so they're not going to go. They're not going to be looking at further afield. So you're going to have this rising tide of the from the smaller from the smaller homes. So there's a lot of competition there for those first home buyers wanting to get into those areas. Some might call it affluent areas, but even though that word is not as useful to describe the area, because there are many parts of Sydney that weren't affluent before. They're now very affluent. If affluence is juxtaposed with the value of a property, you've got homes in the West that are now worth $3-4 million, and homes all over Sydney, of different values. Why? Because of the construction costs and because of the amount of land that they sit on. So affluence not necessarily the right word, but they just don't want to move from where they grew up, right? So as you said, the upsizers, you got people that have got that second wind, that they got a bit of step in there, a bit of that confidence moving forward, as I said earlier on, because of the political arena abroad. They've got greater confidence in terms of our economy, the business, whatever business they run into, that they have or they're running, whatever jobs they're in, whether they're in law, whether they're public servants. Public servants are getting a mozza, and the pay rises keep on climbing. And you could say that in many areas they're the ones that are driving the markets as well, because they don't want to move away from your inner west, from your suburbs closer to the Sydney CBD. Yeah, you got your Kryptonians, and hand in hand with the Kryptonians are your your desperate housewives because these are the young people, middle aged or whatever age they've been sitting on stocks and cryptocurrencies, and now they've made a lot of money because of again the geopolitical spectrum abroad, and now they want to diversify. They want to diversify, and they've made a lot of money. I liken it to perhaps even more than what happened in 2022. In the buzz of 2021, 2022 with the cryptocurrencies. And you got this, but now they're, I guess as I call them, the desperate housewives, their partners are saying, hey, enough is enough. We've waited a long time. And because of the immigration policies of the PR holders that are coming in, and because of the immigration policies, there's no real outlook, in my view, that many have in the real world, not in the social media world, but in the real world, the property prices are going to come down anytime soon. More to the point, freestanding homes, across most of the Sydney markets. You could say in some parts they've experienced 0.7%, 0.5% in some markets of Sydney. Things have definitely slowed down towards the end of the year because of the amount of listings on market in your high end markets. But overall, people are making that change. So these are the competitors that are out there for those that are wanting to transact in 2025 and get into the property arena. I mean, notwithstanding your typical investors, which are your incorporates, your WeChat chatterers, and everybody else that wants to buy into your silent tigers as well, the local silent tigers. That are cashed up and are going to be inheriting a lot more wealth because those, as we've said before in previous shows, the developments that are now complete over in India. Guess what? There are a lot of silent tigers going over to India to cash out of those markets there, and they've got PR. The PR holders here, and that money's coming back here because their kids don't want to go and live back in India. They don't. Nice place to visit, but wouldn't want to stay there, is the old saying.
Yeah, and I think the demand for property will be strong. The expectation, I guess, rates will come down at some point next year, although it may be later than many expect, depending on what happens with Trump and tariffs and all those sorts of things. I think the other factor we should also bear in mind, Edwin, is the old distressed seller scam, which is quite big at the minute. And I think we're going to see more of that in 2025 as well. In other words, properties being advertised as distressed seller or mortgagee in possession, et cetera, particularly distressed seller. Now, we should, I think, highlight that this is often more a marketing ploy than it is reality.
Yeah, the questions that people need to ask themselves is, who is a distressed seller? Define the distressed seller. I know what Louis Christopher defines it, as being a distressed sale, and what Domain defined as being the distressed sale. But it's just words on an ad on Domain or realestate.com. On the marketing paraphernalia. But what did the overall numbers really show? You talk about I can't remember her name from CoreLogic. She talks about this. To their data. Their data really didn't show a lot over 2024 in terms of real distress sales. But the question is why what are the real distress sales, and why are they distressed? In conversations with people in the banking sector, the majority of the distress sales were made up of people that they basically tacked on SUVs they're worth $250,000 on the line of credit. And all of a sudden, Stuart needs a sports car for the weekend. He can't drive the company car on the weekend. He needs his sports car because he's going through a midlife crisis. Janet needs her own car as well to go to the ladies' meetings and so forth. Little Johnny and little Mary, they can't catch the bus to school anymore. They've got to drive cars as well because they can. Now they can pull down on equity. And these are the people these are the real people that are distressed. But at the end of the day, also, Martin, is the obviously I don't have the figures, I don't have the numbers. The numbers that I did follow up on from different posts on different social media sites of properties that were advertised as distressed sales, and after doing a quick search through the portals that we subscribe to through the Price Finder and CoreLogic and all that. And when you do a quick analysis of what those properties were bought for originally, what they were sold, they still made a fair bit of money, even though the sales were distressed. They may have been crying about it that they didn't have much money left over at the end of the day. But it's not because the values of the properties dropped. It's because of the loans on top of the mortgage that they took out for all these extra toys that they bought along the way. And this is where people just lose it. They've got no control, like you said, Martin, earlier on. A lot of people don't have those management skills. And we're not taught at school. We're not taught at school. Where what we learn at school is things that in the most part we'll never use ever again. But we're not taught life skills such as financial management.
No, that's exactly right. As we said earlier on, and one of the reasons why this show exists is to try and help people get a better grip on their finances and make good decisions rather than bad decisions. Because the trouble is with a property decision, you take it at a point in time, but that decision then echoes down the generation, as it were, down the years. And if you do make a bad decision, it can be quite difficult to extract yourself from it without losing a lot of money. And just remind people that there are North Ryde high-rise properties that are now still lower in value than they were in 2017. So not all property prices go up in all areas. So it's very important to make good decisions. Now, I guess the other thing in terms of 2025, we would expect to see more agents buying the listings still. And, the big gap between setting an expectation in the mind of the vendor so that they get the listing and then trying to actually meet the market and going through that wrangling process, and often the vendor then getting disappointed later. We're going to see a lot of that, I think, Edwin, in 2025.
Well, 100%. We're going to see a lot of that, and this is where a lot of the property commentators get it all wrong as well, because there's a big difference between asking price, selling price, and price drops. And this is where, as I said, some of these weird name websites that talk about price drops or talk about asking, all the BS about this and that, and trying to turn it into all you can sort of order to rely on to make your property decisions is that they get it all wrong. Look, I've got two cases in mind. One is a really good friend of mine is a senior manager partner of an LJ Hooker office, and his sister, just sold her home, and she got other agents. She got other agents to give her a market appraisal, and they told her that her home was worth between 4.2 million and 4.6 million. Most of them come up with a median of 4.4 million. And she was about to go with this particular agent that was hell bent on 4.4. At the end of the day, this is her sister, his sister, and went to auction. Actually, I'll make Tom Panos conducted the auction, and they were 30,000 short of 4 million, but they still sold on the day. What was my friend's appraisal of the property? He said, "Sis, your house is not worth more than 4 million. It's 4 million. I'm giving it to you straight." But so there's your case in point where agents were trying to sell her the story that her house was worth from 4.2 to 4.6 just to get the listing. At the end of the day, the outcome would have been that the 4 million. But it's a skill that's learned and it's perfected over years that agents use, and Tom himself teaches it. How to buy the listing, and then basically he calls it raising the hopes and taking it away from them. Before soon after they basically sign on the dotted line. Another case in point was a good mate of mine that I mentioned his property a while back as well on the show. That I told him, mate, your property is only worth 4.85. Well, if it's well presented. I mean, I helped them to present the property. I helped them out to fix a few things in the house in order to present well, in its best light, so you can achieve it. But I had in mind to get another friend of mine to assist him with the sale, but he chose another agent that told him he was going to get 2.1 to 2.3 million every day of the week, mate. Every day of the week, 2.1 to 2.2. That's what your house is worth. There was another local agent that told him that the house was worth 2.5, which is a bit of a stretch. At the end of the day, the hammer came down at 1,850, and he sold. Because he got smashed down, but that's all it was worth. So this is where people have got to be careful with, asking price, selling price, and price drops. Expectations and reality are two different points, and many people convolute or confuse expectations with reality when they do the commentary about property. I'll see how it fell. Property price of the sky is falling. The sky is falling. That's the sheer reality of it, Martin. And now that's this is in the Sydney market. In other parts, we could talk on about other properties as well. But at the end of the day, that point is more about the shenanigans and the strategies, the unlawful, unscrupulous, and very unethical strategies that agents are using to confuse buyers and also sellers to an extent as well, to confuse them. And that is one of the things that distorts the market in general, because then you don't have price discovery, which I'm still trying to put together that commentary so we can share on one of our next shows as to how much more, or how big this push to undermine price discovery is becoming in the real estate industry, in order to manipulate the market to benefit the selling agents, and to really it will distort a lot of commentator will distort a lot of that price discovery moving forward, Martin, which is sad. Rather than being more transparent, things are becoming darker. No, is there any reason why they say it's all smoke and mirrors?
Well, that's true. And of course, there's less information on the portals. There's less good information, a lot of non-disclosed sale prices. And unless you go to the government to data in New South Wales, you can do that. In some other places, you can't these days. It's very hard to actually understand what the market is really doing. And then, of course, the agents will trot out specific examples to benefit their own position. So, again, I think it's important to understand that this is a big element in the stupidity of the marketplace at the moment. And don't be misled. If you're a vendor, don't be misled with the yeah, sure, it's massive, and then actually maybe not. Maybe we'll have to drop the price by several $100,000 to be able to get a purchaser, and then you suddenly say, well, hang on a moment, you're telling the purchaser one thing, you're telling me there's something else, and that isn't price discovery, right? That's actually that's an illusion, and it's playing to the strength of the agent's ability to be able to get a deal at any price, never mind whether it's the right price. And I guess as the other factor is, the broader economics, we should reflect on that. We know that we've been supported, by some time thanks to the resource sector. In fact, there was a really, really good article written by John Kehoe. John's really selling into the Australian economy in the AFR at the moment. Luck running out as boom goes bust. And he basically argues that the average net worth of households may have expanded, but it's a bit artificial. The chances are that ahead it's going to be much more difficult. And I think that's probably true. We are going to see, I think, the issue with regard to the deficit continue to rise. So, of course, if you look at the deficit in Australia, the federal government compared with the share of revenue, percentage of GDP is rising. That's actually from Treasury. And, of course, the budget underlying is even worse rather than the headline. So we have a lot of debt going on at the moment in Australia. That a lot of that debt's being funneled from the government into the economy to try and support it. Meantime, we have China looking as though it could come off the boil, continue off the boil, although they're throwing more money at China at the moment. More of that's going to be felt in 2025. I suppose the good news is with the low dollar, we might see a lot of tourism, people coming into Australia because it's cheap. But of course, that also has impacts on other things that we get involved in. So thinking particularly of some of those imports that might be more expensive than we would want to see. And I guess the other point is there ahead, we would expect to see the students continuing to flood in. The lip service about dialing back migration seems to have gone away. They seem to be looking at whatever they can do to pull. And I think, Edwin, you would probably say that India is going to be the source. The silent tiger is going to be the thing that we're going to see. And what we might do is put up perhaps your initial thoughts for next year, and we'll just get you to walk through those briefly, because it is quite interesting just understanding that some of these are the same, but some of these are a bit different from last year, and how this all plays out.
Yeah, look, the 2025. These are my prelude predictions. I'll put them up on X later on. Yeah, it really is, in my view, it really is going to be the year the silent tigers roar. Because look, going back to our dependency. Like again, we were hooked like junkies. Our politicians were hooked like junkies, rather than decoupling from China and looking at other markets. They just couldn't let go. It was the mistress that was just too good. And here we are. So and I'd say we're going to be feeling that in a spectacular fashion. But the actual effect of the mining sector, not being as strong because China is on free fall, is going to be really felt more in 2025, 2026. And as you said earlier on, Martin, it comes back to international students, tourism, and immigration. Obviously, immigration is taboo from China at the moment, and will continue to be so. And it's going to be very, very hard. And in actual fact, the Chinese people themselves, even if they wanted to come out, even if they came out with a tourist visa and they ran away, they still can't. They've got very little cash to come out with, because you just can't get money out of China, and that's just so tight there that so we've obviously, the government has as tact, and we called it. We called it back when Don Perrottet went over to India. We said watch this space, because he hasn't gone over to India just to taste the curry. Because if you really wanted to just have a good curry, all you need to do is to go to Harris Park. And there's some good places also in Burwood where you can have some really good Malaysian curry as well. So yeah, it wasn't for that. It's for other reasons. Just really and this is how it played out, to the point where at the beginning of 2024, I started talking about it, and I shared on the shows that off the cuff. We were talking about what was happening, the transition that was happening with the economy there in the upper middle class, what was happening there in India. And so obviously back then we also said that a lot of the people that came in with working visas over from India for the quickest pathway is still in the medical arena, and even that got so diluted. So you've got this influx of people coming in from India, have been coming in, and they've been somewhat renting. They've been renting properties around here, watching and seeing where they're going to settle long term. And 2025 is the year where I feel that they're really going to come out in droves. That's those new Indian migrants that have come over from India over the last 12, 18 months. And then you got more migrants coming in for under work visa, under a pretext of work. As I said before, you take away the name of the visa, take away the number of the visa, putting a new name, putting a new number of the visa, and at the end of the day, the tally is going to be the same. It's going to be more migrants coming in. And let's not forget that the property sector, according to many, need more workers in order to make up the deficit that we have with the 1.2 million properties that the government has promised the constituents. So yeah, the silent tigers are going to roar in 2025. The unfortunate thing is, because of the markets that many are getting into, in both investors, silent tigers, and also what the WeChat chatters have been looking at, and it's somewhat affordable. Currently there's just over 1,000 freestanding homes on market for sale in the Sydney region, according to Domain. You can do a search yourselves, and you can see for yourselves, which is scary. That only, and in this, and when you do that search, the unfortunate thing is that that search doesn't differentiate duplexes, villas. Sometimes agents define a villa or a townhouse as a home, and but there's only 1,000 in the Sydney region listed for sale at the moment. So I believe that 2025 is going to be the year where the $1 million freestanding home is going to disappear. That's the unfortunate thing, because of the demand and people moving further out to the outskirts of the Sydney region, in order to be able to literally get into the market, because they don't want to buy into a dog box. Although I said that Alba wasn't going to be leading the Labor Party in 2024, I'm going to carry that forward to 2025. I don't believe that he will lead the Labor Party into the next election. Because of the government policies, lack of construction, the stepping up of the Kryptonians and everybody else that made a lot of money in stocks and that, and that enthusiasm to that newfound enthusiasm for future business here in Australia. I think, because it's a small market, I think that there's going to be a 5 to 7% rise across Sydney in 2025. And my caveat, of course, is that it's going to be freestanding homes and markets. Obviously, the older apartments in your small 3-story walk-ups, that are three-story and some 4-story walk-ups that are generally 15 years plus, in low-set developments, they're going to be in hot demand across many of Sydney markets because people, it's inevitable. You're not going to be able to afford a home or a villa or a townhouse. So the next best thing is an apartment. So they're going to be in hot demand across many markets of Sydney in your low set developments. A bounce back in the confidence to buy property due to the Trump effect, which we've talked about. That's going to happen. And cheekily, I just put that point number 7, which is Trump offers our PM, whoever's going to be leading us in the tail end of 2025, offers to become the 53rd state. But that's just a snapshot of what I'm about. A prelude. I'll refine these and I'll put them up on my X or my Twitter account. Over the next day or two.
Well, that's good, Edwin. Thank you for that. In fact, Jason Smith threw this question in: what can we do about the housing crisis? Do I just live in my car or rent a room out now? That's it's a really difficult and complicated question. And I guess if you've listened to what Edwin's been talking about, then he's saying that there are some questions relating to migration. I still think the migration is too high. We need migration dialed back. I think at the moment, because there is not enough supply to meet existing demand in Australia. The other interesting factor, if you want to sort of really take a view as to, one of the other reasons why Australia is so debt-ridden at the moment, particularly at the government level, and that's because, of course, as I've discussed with Leith Van Onselen recently, we actually are giving away our gas with a lot of, amazing. This is from the Australian Institute. Australia gives over half the gas exported from Australia to foreign-owned gas corporations for free. The gas belongs to Australians. We are paying top dollar in Australia for gas at the moment, which means that electricity prices are very expensive. That's another reason why people are actually under significant pressure. And that's one of the reasons why we see the economy looking pretty shaky because the government's made bad policies. And I guess what I want to highlight is that a lot of these housing-related issues are directly sheeted at bad policy from government over many years. And that's what John Kehoe was about in his article, actually saying they've made bad decisions. If you look at Norway and their sovereign wealth fund, that's grown massively. We don't have a sovereign wealth fund in Australia. In fact, we've got debt wall to wall and it's rising. But I'd also make the point, Jason, that if you are actually thinking about this from a point of view of trying to buy a property, you be cautious and careful, but not all property is equally good or bad. And it's really important to buy the right type of property at the right price point with the right characteristics. And that's where listening to Edwin and I talking and other people on this channel and elsewhere will perhaps give you a bit of a clue as to where to look. Don't necessarily go for the cheap high-rise option because often high-rise, particularly if it's newly built, has huge floors, and off-the-plan high-rise is a no-no in my view. I would go for older high-rise, older low-rise, as Edwin said earlier on, if you're going to buy in that sector of the marketplace. And the other point is, what is property for at the end of the day? And this is one of the critical questions. I think I want to come back to this as we close the show out. Property can be seen either as a speculative asset, just like, shares and crypto, whatever else, or it can be seen as somewhere to live. The problem we've had a financialization of property to the point where more and more people think of it just as a speculative asset. But the point is that a property provides shelter and it provides you a home base. And to my mind, we need to swing the pendulum back towards seeing property more as somewhere to live. And that means that sometimes you might buy when the markets are looking wobbly rather than when they're expected to go up. And you might buy a property further out because you can buy it cheaper rather than one that's closer in, which might actually fit the finances better. And you might buy a property that actually needs a bit of work, but over time you can do that work. But on the other hand, if you are relying on traders to come and do the work for you, then you're probably underestimating the cost of renovations. So the point is that the whole string of things to think about. But the bottom line is this, that in the short term, there is not going to be a relief to the pressure on housing. The supply is not going to magically get fixed. Government policy won't do that. We discussed that earlier on. We expect to see interest rates coming down over the course of this year, but probably later in the year than some people are thinking at the moment. And interest rates probably won't go down to where they were before the last run-up. So the 0% interest rate or the 2% mortgage was that's probably never going to be seen again. So we're always going to be seeing a mortgage rate of a 3 or a 4 or a 5, which is going to change the complexion of the game. But then on the other hand, we've still got a lot of demand and a lot of people from overseas looking at Australia and still thinking it's a good place to come and make home. So those are some of the factors to bear in mind. Final point to make is that not all markets are behaving the same way. So Perth is going in one direction at the moment, although it's easing back, compared with Hobart that has dropped and is, going along the bottom. Melbourne continuing to fall, and in fact looks though it could fall further. Sydney in some areas easing back, particularly top end, but in other areas still going higher. So again, you need to look granularly, you need to look locally, and get those local pieces of information together to be able to make good property decisions. Because the bottom line is this: you make a good property decision not looking macro top down, but looking granular bottom up, and you look at particular properties in particular areas and do your homework and know where fair value is, and then go from there. And there are still pockets where property is still a good buy even now, in my view. And that's something to bear in mind. So it's not universally gloomy, neither is it universally buoyant. You have to just sort of pick your battles and pick your case, Edwin. And I guess, Edwin, any thoughts that you want to make as we come to the end of the show with regards to buying property at the moment?
Look, I think people have just got to be ruthless, Martin. 2025 for me is going to be the year to be ruthless. Be ruthless with in answering Jason as well. Synonymously is also be ruthless with your time. Be ruthless who you spend time with. What you do, because at the end of the day, you've got to look up. You've got to focus on yourself. And we spend too much. We spend not enough time on bettering ourselves. We spend more time on judging others and what they do or what they don't do, focusing on others rather than focusing on ourselves. So that's when I say be ruthless with your time is to so that you can make every minute count in 2025. Because that's going to be obviously determine how you're going to step in and step out of 2025. There was a time. There were a couple of times in more than a couple of times, as a matter of fact, where I slept in my car for not having a roof over my head for slept in my car for 3-4 weeks. Yes, I had my sisters, I had my family, I had my my father and my mother there, but whether I was too embarrassed or whether I was well, for whatever reason, I was down out, so if Jason's going through that, if that's where he is, make the time. I had to grit my teeth, and I had to be creative. One of those times was at the beginning of when I just transitioned from telecommunications business that I had into real estate. Not soon after, went through a very, very difficult time, health wise and family wise, and the like. And and as I said, I was too embarrassed to knock on my family's doors and pretty much living from the boot of my car. But I had to then be creative, and what I did, Martin, for 6 to 8 weeks, whilst I got my bearings back in line, I spoke to a developer, and I maintained the townhouses in North Parramatta, looked after the complex, kept them all clean, and, and I did the open house inspections as well. So you have to be creative, whatever it takes. And that's why I say, going back, thinking about it now is and thinking about 2025 is the year to be ruthless, with your time, how you spend it, who you spend it with, what you do, and and if look, you got a choice. We either spend half an hour on checking what other people put on posts and getting angry or upset about what they put on or tweet about or not tweet about, or we could get put a towel on the floor and do some push-ups and sit-ups for that half an hour, and health-wise you're gonna mentally you're gonna be better off. Health-wise you're gonna be better off, and mentally you're gonna be better off as well. That's what I mean when I say be ruthless with your time in 2025.
I think it's a very good tip, Edwin. And you only have a set of allotted time, so invest it well and do the things that actually make a big difference. I think it's a really important closing thought. Well, Edwin, I want to say thank you very much indeed for spending time live a bit later on our Monday Rant live tonight. We'll be back to our normal scheduling next week, so we'll be recording a show, and of course we will try and do it every week of the year, come hell or high water. We've got to keep our reputation intact with regard to our weekly rants. But thank you, Edwin, very much for that. I hope you have a great New Year too, and New Year celebrations, etc., etc. And I'll look forward to catching up with you again next Monday. And thanks to everybody in the chat for the conversation. Jason, thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Really appreciate it. And I just want to say thank you to Jason and to everybody else for their contributions through the year, both in terms of the super chats and indeed the comments and the support. We really do appreciate all the support and all the comments that we get. We take them seriously. And if you have specific ideas and questions you'd like us to cover out in future rants, feel free to put them in the comments below or at any time. We'll always try and get to them. And I wanted to shout out to those people who've sent us various ideas and articles and clips and specific facts and things over the year, and we've incorporated it into our show. So really appreciate that. We could have not have done such a good job this year as we've done if we hadn't got all that input from everybody. So I want to say thank you, Edwin. I'm going to take you offline. Happy New Year to you, and I'm going to close the show. And thank you very much to everybody. Just to say that tomorrow we will be on again live, same time, 8 p.m. Sydney time, with the Damien Klassen view of the world. And that's going to be looking, I think, at the financial markets over the last year, importantly next year. So join us for that, same time tomorrow night. Thank you very much indeed for spending some time on a Monday night with us. And I hope that you've found that a useful conversation. Just to say that the doggies are, well, half here. So we have one dog. Luna's here. Meteor's actually under my feet. She thinks it's time for lunch, so she's been giving me squeaks and paws and things to try and actually encourage me to go and feed her. So that'll be my next line of argument in terms of what I do next. So thank you very much. Wish you a very, very happy New Year if you don't join us tomorrow evening. And I'll look forward to seeing you on one of the live shows next year, if not tomorrow. And of course, check out our recorded shows. We still make them daily, and we'll continue to do that over the next few weeks and months. So thank you very much. Take care. Happy New Year. And we will see you again soon. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics signing off. Cheerio.